Hello everybody, it's AJ back again with the Explorers series on the Mighty Glue Stick. How's it going? Hope your week's been good. This week I'm going to be covering the Anauroch Desert and also the ancient empire of Netherese, because you can't really talk about the Anauroch Desert without the ancient empire of Netherese. So I'll start talking about that, just to give you a background of what I'm talking about. Netherese was a magocracy, was one of the ancient human empires of Faerûn. Netherese was also the home of the most powerful wizard who ever walked on Faerûn, Karsus. The Netherese also created powerful artifacts known as mythals, which allowed mundane objects to become magical, dramatically changing the face of the Netherese Empire, or better said, the face of the upper side of the empire, as Netherese eventually became twofold: the have high Netherese and the have not low Netherese. The Neth was a group of small farming villages that banded together for protection and led to an empire of human wizards, cities that floated across the sky in a terrible, terrible arrogance that nearly stripped Toril of its magic forever. It can be said that the Empire of Netherese was the oldest surviving human empire, and as such, it is not surprising that it passed through several different phases. The first age was the founding and settling of Netherese region by humans, and of their contact with elves who taught them magic. This followed by the Nether Age, so-called Nether Scroll Age, used to rapidly increase their knowledge of magic, undoubtedly the peak of their power. This was also a time when the Netherese were breaking new ground, both in advances in magical pursuits, but also in exploitation of other planes and even cross crystal spheres during the age. This is when Karsus came into power, a wizard of immense power who sought to seize the power of the gods themselves. He kind of a hallmark of the Netherese was they believed that anything was possible. Anything could be reached for, that nothing was out of their reach, and there was limitless scope to their development as people, as individuals. So Karsus, wizard of immense power, sought to seize the power of the gods, and it was this folly that led to the next age, the fall of the empire, broken and shattered. It took the Netherese people a while to regroup, but eventually came to the most recent age, the re-emergence of the empire, which brings us to the modern age. So the fall of the empire was Karsus's folly. He attempted to steal the power of Mystryl, the goddess of magic. She sacrificed herself in a last-ditch effort to save Faerûn and was replaced by Mystryl. When this happened, all magic ceased to exist for a time. So the Netherese cities, which floated above the surface, basically they were chopped in half mountains, flipped over so that the peaks were pointing down, and they built cities on top of these chopped up shards of rock that were traveling through the sky, just majestically huge, massively impressive, classically magical looking cities. And when the magic switched off, these things fell from the sky. So one of the hallmarks of the Anauroch Desert is these ruins of former floating cities, which are scattered all over the place, basically like a plain of standing stones. And if you go into the nooks and crannies of the Anauroch Desert, it's a desert which flows over and around thousands and thousands of ruins, and some of them are incredibly dangerous. So when you first look at it on the map, it looks like a featureless sort of splotch on the border of things, or separating things, or a hindrance between here and there. But in actual fact, it is a place of immense adventure, and one of the more exciting regions of Faerûn that I quite am fond of. And being as it's a desert environment, it also introduces the idea of survival being a factor in the game, just like the heat and the lack of water, the fact that most of the creatures that live there are predatory, is very interesting. It makes for an interesting sort of thematic plot element that makes venturing into the area quite difficult and therefore quite rewarding. Anyway, so the fall of the empire. Since these Netherese cities have fallen to the ground and magic ceased to exist, and it was almost completely, the Netherese Empire was basically completely obliterated in one fell swoop, and the remnants of that empire, the Netherese, were the target of the Phaerimm. Now, Phaerimm are a type of otherworldly creature. They look really weird. They kind of look like tube sock type things with these grasping arms around the outside. Their face sort of opens up into a maw with these like flower petal type things around the outside. They're really quite alien looking, and they sort of float around. They're aberrations, wholly evil, sadistic, and their desire is to erase all living things from existence, and basically just take over the prime-material plane. And it was the Netherese delving too deeply into magic, really, which brought the Phaerimm into contact with them. It became a deadly threat to their empire. And they fly around and basically drain magic and kill people, in a nutshell. Anyway, so yeah, the Netherese, the fall of the empire, and the remnants of Netheril, targeted by the Phaerimm, went into hiding. Some of them went below ground. Some of them went into other planes of existence. They took off, basically, leaving behind successor states of Asram, An-OAR-ock-hh, and the Tlon-Dathan, and that sort of survived on for a while as 3 colonies, but they were eventually destroyed by the encroaching desert. And some Netherese culture survived in the country of An-OAR-ock-hh and in the Shining South, which was So Netherese wizards led groups of refugees, and foreseeing the destruction of the empire. However, the nation of An-OAR-ock-hh was almost completely wiped out during the spell plague. So it's kind of it's a continual cycle of growth and destruction, and you could say that the great hubris of the Netherese Empire has been duly punished over the intervening years from Karsus's folly. Anyway, so we get more to the modern day, and the Bedine people are now the natives of the Anauroch desert. And the Bedine are basically a proud, warlike race. They're very Arabic in their outlook and style. So they've got brown skin and eyes, black or brown hair, average height, and they've got a very honor-centric culture. If you look at the way that, say, the Klingon culture, the warlike culture, and that honor is very, very important to them and is central to their life. They're divided up into about 100 different tribes. I think one of the largest has got about 300 members. And their language is, they've lost their original written language, but trade has brought different languages into, I think they've got the Thoras alphabet is their current language. And so their spoken language is Madani or Uloshan. So anyway, so they're very Arabic in their outlook, and they ride around on camels. There's lots of camels in the Anauroch desert. There's also riding lizards. There's kind of like dinosaur type creatures, which are more Drake-like actually. And giant birds, that sort of thing. Lots of quite exotic animals live in the desert. And there's also lots of remnants of the previous empire. So where these great cities have fallen, and these thousands of ruins become uncovered and covered over and over again by the shifting sands of the Anauroch desert. It's a landscape of continual threats, excitement, danger, mysteries, secrets, forbidden areas, things that crawl up through the sand and plague the inhabitants of the Bedine are very cautious about this. They also have a culture which, although they worship traditional gods, they have different names. So Lathander, Saloon, Talos, Sirik, Kalambor, Bishaba are known as Atar and Eta, Koza, Nasir, Shondakal, and they have a much more harsh outlook where they believe that their existence is tested by the desert. So they've got lots of rites of passage and things like that, and people who can survive in the desert are respected, kind of like the Fremen from Dune. So this is where you bring in a lot of different elements of desert people. That the desert was created to test the worthy. That the desert came and took the despoilers of the natural world, and this on the bones of their great defeat, their shame. The true people of the world are being tested and smited on the god's hammer, on the god's anvil. The anvil, of course, being the desert. Now, interesting events have occurred. Also active in the area is the Zentarum, a sort of a big mercenary organisation, which I'll cover in more detail later. But basically the Netherese people have started to reappear, coming out of hiding, or coming back from different places. And in fact, the city of Shade has reappeared out of the plane of shadow, the Shadowfell, and it appeared over the great forest and has drifted back into the Anauroch desert to reclaim the ancient empire of the Netherese, the ancient homeland. And to this end, they've been using magical means to reclaim the desert and return it back to sort of arable land, which has been hugely disruptive. But of course, they have no regard for the Bedine people, and also the diminutive Ditarig, who are another race of humans who inhabit the Anauroch desert, mainly around the borders. They stand a little more than 4 feet tall, so they're quite short, puggish noses, wrinkled brows, and they dress in white burnouses with turbans, and they wear special widened sandals to make walking on top of the desert sands easier, and they usually cover their mouths so that their noses and eyes are pretty much the only thing that's visible on their body, but otherwise they wear these sort of voluminous desert robes. And while the Bedine are perhaps more infamous, it's actually more likely that an outsider will come across Ditarig tribesmen first, because they exist more around the borders, and particularly the Bedine are known to inhabit the sword area, and the Ditarig are sort of on the peripheries. So they're also proud and boastful about their expertise in desert survival, making claims that they quite often find difficult to back up. They're naturally suspicious people because they believe that they are immune to trickery. They are in fact expert tricksters themselves, and they're quite capable thieves. They didn't inherit any of they've got some dwarven ancestry, and they haven't inherited any of the stonecraft of their dwarven ancestry, but there are a few individuals with superb sense of direction that's almost preternatural. So they make excellent guides through the ruins and twisting and turning standing stones of the deep desert. So if you look at the topography of the desert, it's divided up into these different zones, and covering that is going to be fairly extensive, so bear with me. So the primary regions are the snow desert. So this is to the frozen north. This is getting towards it's at the sort of latitude where you've got the spine of the world and Neverwinter and things like that. So it gets very cold. So you've got the high ice, which takes up a substantial upper portion of the desert, and then below and to the east of that, you've got the frozen sea. In the middle, you've got the plain of standing stones, and down the bottom, more towards the south, you've got what is known as the sword. So that's the wide regions of Anauroch. Travel through the Anauroch region is divided up by trade routes. So there's Zentarum-controlled oases, there's open oases, there's Zentarum-only caravan routes, there's main caravan routes, and there's different places that people live. So Darkhold is one of the biggest inhabited places in the Sword, and you've got Lion's Eye Oasis, which is fairly famous. You've got the central region, which is the Sayadar. You've got sort of the mountain range and the well of the chasm, the road of jackals, the bitter well, El Mazra, the bordering areas. Further up towards the frozen areas, you've got the throat, which travels up into the high ice, the oasis of vipers, as you're coming down into the sword region. And if you cross over from the lonely moor, the first place you get to is Vorthal, I think it is Vorthal. Anyway, so there's lots of different locations, but the most of the trade, commerce in areas around settlements in the mountains outside of the open dunes, because it's just easier to live in the more sheltered areas. Because there's a kind of a lake area in the middle there. So and Tel Bidar and the Lost Vale as you head into the Dale lands and the Moonsea area. And then, of course, down below, if you head further south, you go into Cormier. And if you're heading further over to the east, you enter into the Sword Coast and all of those areas. So it's kind of centrally located. The trade routes of Anauroch are quite important. Kind of, if you can get across if you find a reliable way to get across Anauroch, you can become fabulously wealthy through trade. And of course, it's a place that's rife with brigandry and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of politics involved in the trade routes that go across there. Anyway, there are a couple of really good source books that are available to you. The Anauroch, the Empire of Shade source book is available as a PDF. Also, there's an old second edition, I believe it is, source book, which is also very extensive. And that's the AD&D accessory Anauroch Desert, which is also available as a PDF. So I guess the best thing that I could say about Anauroch as a location is that it's twisting and turning. It's got a lot of hidden depth to it, and it's a place that you can easily locate a lot of really cool, weird encounters and delving into things. It's a place where there's a lot of stuff which has been lost, and it's quite reasonable to assume that there's a huge amount of it which hasn't been explored. And although the place has been consistently sort of inhabited by the Badine and other folk, they know well enough to stay away. I mean, ordinary people don't go into these ruins and things because it's deadly, but it's a draw card to many adventuring types. And the Badine occasionally stand in the way of people who would go in there without due cause. Like if you're just going in there and you don't know what you're looking for, they may say, look, it's best that you do not disturb the ancient tombs of our forefathers because they have left behind horrors, and the shame of their grasping for power unlocked all kinds of dangers which are now free to walk the earth once more and haunt their descendants like a curse of the gods. So they will see you as people who could possibly unlock crypts and things which are just going to bring more hardships on their people and more dangers to the world. So in many ways they say it's better that the desert swallow the memory of the past and that we maintain a humble aspect and let the desert work its temperament on us to forge us into a better people. So I would recommend read up on the history of the Netherese. If you can get hold of the source book Lost Empires of Faerûn, there's extensive information on the Empire of the Netherese Empire, the greatest magocracy, and what happened. And it also informs you a lot about the operation of magic and the role of magic and the gods of magic in Faerûn, and forms a good bedrock to understand how the weave and things work, and also how it was disrupted and how it can be disrupted, and it set the stage for the spell plague and that sort of thing. And yeah, it is if there's one thing I can say, which is one of the best things and also one of the most difficult things as somebody who's conveying information to you about Faerûn, is that it's a living campaign world. It's not written down in pages and never changes. It's constantly updating and changing, and the timeline of the world is progressing even as I speak to you about it now. New plots, new events are up and coming, and I'm catching up on things as I go, just as anybody else is. And also some of the information I'm giving you may already be out of date. So I'll most likely be contradicted many times as I go into this, because I'm learning about it at the same rate that you are. So new information may come to light. But Anauroch Desert is a place where there's a lot of ancient knowledge and ancient empires, storehouse of wealth, power, and amazing stuff, and also deadly disasters, tragedies, haunted horrors, that sort of thing. There's a lot of dead people and dead walking people that are inside those standing stones. And as you go up further north, of course, there's ice and desert and wasteland and predators and white dragons and worms and things, and there's sandworms and there's giant beetles, and there's Phaerimm, and there's the reappeared floating mountain that's come from the Shadow Dark, Shadowfell, with the Shadowvar people, who were the arrogant ancient Netherese who have been warped and twisted by their long exile in the Shadowfell, to the point where they're a dark and twisted people, kind of like the Shadow'ach, but with that haughty arrogance of we are the re-established magocracy of the Netherese Empire. We have reclaimed this land for ourselves, and we will take back this desert and remake it back into what it was, the garden paradise that it once was in their eyes, but never actually was that great. So yeah, I'll leave that there, and we'll cover other areas kind of briefly as we go, and we'll return back to Seagull and talk about the City of Doors some more, and some of the areas and some of the wards, and talk about the Dabu people and the Lady of Pain. And also we're going to go travelling off, and I'm going to be talking about AUKHH in upcoming videos, and AUKHH's plane of existence. I'm going to be covering various different areas, Cormyr and the Dale lands, Neverwinter, the Spine of the World, the Kingdom of Many Arrows, all sorts of different areas. The Shining South. We'll keep going, and we'll return back to Karatua and talk about the great amount of politics and history that's behind that place. We'll cover some of the islands, Moonshay, and various other places, some of the other continents, talk about places that you'll probably never even get to in your campaigns, that you may possibly briefly go there in little extra dimensional jaunts if you get dropped off back in Toril without proper guidance, if you get a mishapping gate spell that drops you off in the middle of nowhere. You may refer back to some of these videos and cover in brief some of these environments. I do recommend Critical Hit Publishing and the Environment series, including the Desert and Survival source books, which are written by Dave Brown Jackson. Those are really good. I'll put a link to those in the description down below. That's no commercial plug on my end. That's just me giving a shout out to some excellent resources that I consider to be just really good required reading and good reference material for if you're running your game through a different environment or dominant environment such as oceans and things like that. Those source books are ideal for that. So yeah, no kidding, those are really good. I heartily recommend them. And also for just random roll tables and things like that, I'm a huge fan of random roll tables and stuff. And Raging Swan does arguably the best random roll tables available to you, and I would definitely recommend them to anybody who's looking at not necessarily writing up all these dungeons and things like that, and ruins and things, but just sort of randomly generating them as you go. Those random roll tables for dungeon dressing and things like that are essential for that sort of a game, and make it really interesting, because not only do the players not have any idea what's coming next, but neither do you, and you basically piece it together from random rolls as you go, which makes it an exciting sort of a game to run as a DM as well as a player. Trusting your DM to stay faithful to whatever he or she is rolling, and knowing that they're not planning it out ahead of you makes it a challenge for everybody, and it's kind of a group exploration fun. Right, okay. I'll be back again very soon with a monster ecology video. I hope you like this brief touch on the Anauroch Desert, just to give you some idea of what it is, what it looks like, who lives there. And hopefully we'll be able to get back to the desert and talk about it in more depth later. But there's also other deserts, the deserts of purple sands, and all sorts of other places, environments in Tyrol to talk about. So we'll cover those as well. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'll speak to you again soon.